Hello and welcome to the Sky Blue Times YouTube channel. Off the back of a video I did recently on James Trafford, more news has come out which seems to suggest that the most likely outcome is Ederson leaving and James Trafford coming in as the new number one for Manchester City. In that video I touched on the quotes from James Trafford, and there's been plenty others that resurface about his desire to be the Manchester City number one, his self-confidence and belief that he can make that jump and be that guy. I think we've seen that in several performances that I touched on in that video, namely England under-21s, performance in the final, the way he can take advantage of situations where he needs to save penalties and come up trumps for his team. We've seen that throughout last season with Burnley, keeping 12 clean sheets in a row. That really is something quite special. I believe that is a record for the Championship. That's second most across English football history, behind Manchester United in the Premier League with 14. And then his 29 clean sheets is part of the team that kept 30 clean sheets that season. That is a joint English football record. So this is clear. This is not just a keeper that's performed very well in the Championship last season. This is a keeper that's put up an almost all-timer season, if not an all-timer season, for a goalkeeper amongst a team in the Championship in English football. So that is there's a lot more than people are just suggesting as being a good season. Obviously, there's a lot of caveats with that season, with how he did in the Premier League. There's also concerns to be had about what the qualities that he does bring to the table. Where does he lack? Where did he not perform when he was in the Premier League with Burnley? Plenty of other stuff to get into, and we'll get into that in this video. And first thing really to kind of touch on is the fact that Ederson would be departing. Now, if you're thinking about the last couple seasons, at least in my opinion, it's felt like that move has kind of been on the cards the last couple summers, and that if Guardiola had already extended his contract before last summer, and then you've still got Ederson with the offers from Saudi that are going to come in with these big wages, they were definitely interested in paying a fee. I'm not sure they would have paid the biggest fee that City would have liked, but a decisive factor in him staying was Guardiola's convincing him to stay, and part of that would have been that Guardiola was leaving this summer, at least at the time he would have been. And as we know from the way Guardiola is, he doesn't make those decisions kind of planned out long term. He makes them in the moment, and obviously he did do that midway through the season and has decided to extend. So under a different circumstance, I think it's definitely possible Ederson would have left, and to me it always felt like this summer he was going to, especially changing his agent. If his wages are met, then it's definitely a move he would consider. And obviously, with Guardiola extending, with him already using that card of asking him to stay just that one extra season, it felt like it was possible. But then where City would go next, I wasn't really sure at all. I think Diogo Costa was the kind of obvious one that people would say. Obviously, playing the Portuguese national team with Ruben Diaz, with Bernardo Silva, knows Mateus Nunes as well. So you've got that kind of familiarity that they'd come into the team with already existing senior players that they know well. They'd be able to bed in quite quickly. Obviously, being 25 years old, played lots with the national team, captain Porto. This is a guy with plenty of experience, so it makes sense he would be able to come in and settle quickly in a team that needed him to hit the ground running. And then on top of that, you've got all the other aspects that he does bring. He does, in my opinion, look like an improvement as a shot stopper on Ederson. He looks like he'd be more than comfortable with the demands that we would have with goalkeepers with the ball at their feet and the distribution aspect. So it seemed like the obvious good move to make. But as we found out with Hugo Viana throughout this summer, often that first target is not necessarily the main guy. We've seen that with a few different positions that they've been looking at. There was a time where we always felt like Cambiasso was the obvious left back to come in, and then straight away we've shifted over to Ryan Aït-Nouri. So yeah, I think that's just a little kind of thing to bear in mind when it comes to future transfers with Viana, that he does seem to set up a few different plates, spin a few plates, and then changes his mind, or at least finalises the deal off the back of that, rather than thinking that this one guy for the whole time is who we're going to pursue and eventually get. And I will do definitely a video diving deeper into Ederson across his entire career in more detail. I think it's absolutely worth that, and a lot of the kind of takes around Ederson do a disservice to his ability all around as a goalkeeper. That this idea that Guardiola is only looking for a keeper that distributes well is just not true. And Ederson is outstanding in this regard. We just can't look to try and find a keeper that will replicate that exactly. But we can still find keepers that are very good with their feet, and then we can still find keepers that in other aspects are improvement. But Ederson, as an all-around keeper, is able to do a lot of the things that you need for a Guardiola keeper. It's not just about distribution. It's about claiming crosses. It's about your focus and your confidence on the ball. It's about the sweeping actions as well. There's many different things. Obviously, he has very good reflex saves. It's a standout to people that he's not the very best 1v1, and that's where you've kind of concede something for what you gain with the distribution aspect. But there's still many parts of his game as a goalkeeper where Ederson does perform very well, and we'll get onto that a little bit later in this video in comparisons to Alisson in some of the stats that I'll pull up. And if you're concerned about buying James Trafford now because of his age, then I'd point out that he's already played a significant number of 90s across his career, being on loan Accrington Stanley, Bolton, Burnley in the Premier League and in the Championship. He's played a lot of minutes, and then even last season with Burnley in the Championship, he's played 45 90s. So you're not looking at that outstanding individual season there and thinking it's an impressive 10 to 20 game stretch. Like, that's 45 games where he's performed at the very highest level in the Championship, and relative to all the other keepers in Europe, he's arguably performed the very best amongst shot stoppers. You compare that to Ederson at the same age in his career. Trafford's already played a significant amount of more games, so you're not just buying somebody that's barely played. And if we move over to this one here, this is when Manchester City bought Ederson. So he'd played a few seasons in the Portuguese league, makes his move to Benfica, is not the outstanding number one, has one season where he is that number one keeper, and then Manchester City buy him. He comes over at 23, 17-18 season, and then that's off we go for Pep Guardiola's first title at Manchester City. But they weren't buying him off a wealth of experience. They weren't buying him as being an undisputed number one for Benfica for many, many years before they buy him. And they weren't buying somebody that was 25, 26 in their prime with this bulk of experience. So that's just something to bear in mind, that we've seen how successful Ederson has been with such little experience as a goalkeeper, being so young. There's no reason to think why Trafford can't continue to do that as well. If we move over to this one here, this is just Ederson compared to Alisson. And it's important to notice that when you're looking at Ederson's worst season, when we're looking at a lot of the kind of shot-stopping metrics, that came last season, and that was 24-25, finishing third, 25.890, so a little bit unavailable due to injuries that he did pick up throughout the season. His highest when it comes to goals against per 90. But then also, and this is the same for Alisson in his worst seasons, at least the team's worst seasons, is that they're having to deal with the most shots on target that they face in their career. So 3 for Ederson, 3.97 for Alisson. That's then causing them to make more saves. And then the post-shot expected goal, so the likelihood they're going to concede that goal does go up. But then off the back of that, your post-shot expected goals plus and minus, which is kind of an indicator of how well you're doing as a shot stopper. The higher that is, then the better you are doing in saving those shots. Obviously, the negative numbers correspond to you underperforming on that value. And both Ederson and Alisson in those seasons post their highest numbers, and that is due to the fact that they're facing such high quality chances that when you are making those saves, you're getting rewarded for it in the shot stopping metrics. So it's not really a surprise to see them perform well in those, but it's important to bear in mind that this is not the ideal for a team that's going to win the title, to have to save this many. And as good as both of these are, and Alisson is known for being an exceptional shot stopper, even he, when he's facing 4 shots on target per 90, is not managed to stop Liverpool from conceding 43 goals. Yeah, it's just the impact of that. So you do need the settled defence in front of you, whether you are the best keeper in the world or the worst keeper in the world. And that's important to bear in mind when we get to some of the stats for James Trafford a little bit later on. And then when you look at some of the other metrics, like outside the penalty area action, both of these keepers, Ederson and Alisson, are active outside their penalty area. Alisson more so in the early years and then dropped off. And then Ederson kind of maintains around a similar kind of level. You look at crosses stopped, and Alisson per 90 is generally doing a better peak than Ederson, although you see Ederson most recently in the 23-24 season 0.81. But between the two of them, very similar, that both keepers need to be able to stop a number of crosses across their career, across the season, and are doing at least one, or either one every game or at least one every 2 games. And then you look at ball recoveries across all these seasons. Both of these keepers are having to recover at least 1 to 2 balls per 90 minutes. And then when we're looking at clean sheets, both keepers have 2 seasons where they've kept 20 or more clean sheets. Alisson 21 and 20 there, and then Ederson 2 20. Both of these keepers have done very well when it comes to keeping clean sheets. Obviously, when we're looking at clean sheet percentage, same follows over there. Same follows with the save percentage. Post-shot expected goal per shot on target. So this is just the value of the shot that they're facing, the difficulty of it. And as I've alluded to a little bit earlier on, in the worst seasons for the teams, this is where they're facing the highest quality chances as a goalkeeper. So you need to bring that down if you want to see them put up their best numbers. And so yeah, that's what you got to do. You look at most of the other seasons with Alisson, and you've got 0.29 there, but 0.24, 0.27, 0.25, 0.26, and then obviously the peak of 0.33. And then when you look at Ederson, it's been 0.3 for the last 3 before last season, and then it's been below that 0.28, 0.25, 0.29, 0.23. So it's not just about your goalkeeper. You also have to have a good defensive front that is organised, that reduces the number of high quality chances the goalkeeper faces, and then on top of that, you want your goalkeeper to perform even higher, and that's how you put up some of the most impressive numbers. So when you're looking at somebody like Petr Cech's numbers, which I haven't got here, he wouldn't have just been doing that alone by being an outstanding goalkeeper himself. It's built on the Chelsea defence, and then he performs on top. We then look at percentages across the stopped. Both of these keepers above 4% for the most part. Ederson does better than Alisson in this regard, picking up a bit bigger percentage of his crosses that he's stopping. You look at errors leading the shot. Ederson early on 6 and 6, but then reduced that towards the end of his time. You look at Alisson, he had a number of them as well. So both these keepers are needed to play out from the back at a time where that was being a bit more introduced into English football, and both definitely made mistakes at their time doing that. But both have then since made improvements and reduced those errors out of their game. And then when it comes to some of the other metrics, we're looking at goals conceded. Ederson in particular, not great when it comes to saving penalties compared to Alisson, so he concedes more goals from them. And then when it comes to corner kicks, both keepers have had their issues with corner kicks, but there's a lot of other factors involved when it comes to saving those. And then same thing with own goals by the team as well. So if we move over to this one here, this is just to compare last 2 seasons of James Trafford with all the seasons of Ederson, and then the last 2 by Ortega. His first season he played just over 390s in the Premier League, so not really worth adding that. And then even the 2 that I've got here are not particularly great, but last season 1290s from Ortega. That gives you a little bit more of a better idea of the sample size, and just goes to show that he did, Ortega in particular, underperformed as a goalkeeper last season relative to what you would have expected, at least from his performances in the treble season and the 23-24 season in the title run. And then if we look at the first one of James Trafford, as I'd mentioned throughout the stats with Ederson and Alisson, you can't be expecting the keeper to have almost 4 shots on target per 90 and really change the course of history and allow you to concede barely any goals. And when you look at James Trafford in the Premier League last season, almost 6 shots on target per 90 minutes is ridiculous. You look at the post-shot expected goal, 1.93, compared to when Ederson had his worst season, 1.16, and they were giving up lots of high-quality chances, Manchester City, on the break, in those kind of transition moments that teams are able to get shots off inside the box, inside the 6-yard box. You look at the shots that James Trafford's having to deal with. It's not a surprise that he underperformed last season due to a big part of the team in front of him. And then also on top of that, which is one of the concerns to have, is how much he imposes himself in the box to be able to stop crosses, deal with corner situations where he was bullied quite significantly in that first season in the Premier League. Since he's moved to the Championship last season, I think from watching him there's been an improvement in that regard, and he's a lot more commanding inside his box. But that's still something to bear in mind if he makes the move to City, is how well does he handle these corner situations. You need a keeper that's not hesitant on his line, whether he does come out and is ready to just charge out and get a punch on, charge out and collect the ball. And we've seen with David Raya at Arsenal, arguably one of the best in Europe at this aspect of his game. It's been a big help for Arsenal in dealing with those situations. And for James Trafford, you definitely want to see that improvement. So even though when you're looking at 1.07 crosses stopped per 90, so he's stopping a lot of them, but it's because he's facing so many, because during that season they were targeting. So of course you're going to, if the volume's so high, you're going to boost up that per 90 minutes. But when you go back and look at the goals, you can see a lot of goals from corners, and that's because they targeted James Trafford for being poor at commanding his own box. You look at some of the other metrics, 1.54 to 1.11 in terms of outside penalty area actions. He's less so at Burnley, somebody that sweeps a lot. He's less of a keeper that's asked to play out from the back, and we'll get onto that a little bit later when you're kind of comparing it to the likes of Ederson, the likes of Ortega. So the amount of work James Trafford's going to have to do at Manchester City with a good organised defence in front of him is going to be more to do with what he's seen at Burnley when it comes to number of shots on target space. If you look at across Ederson's entire career at Manchester City when they've been playing their very best football, so that when you're asking him to make saves, again, it should be dropping below 2 saves per 90. The post-shot expected goals should drop to at least a level close to what he was dealing with last season in terms of quality of shots given away. But bear in mind the different opposition that he will face will be higher quality. But at least the positions will be given away won't be as advantageous as what he was used to in the Premier League with the Burnley in the 23-24 season. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things to be encouraged about. Obviously to be concerned about when it comes to commanding his own box. But a lot of these metrics are very, very impressive, at least relative to what we've seen from Ederson. When it comes to 29 clean sheets, you think Ederson has most done 20. You're looking at the clean sheet percentage, the save percentage compared to over Ederson's entire career. Obviously it's a Championship, but it's just worth pointing out to just have a little bit of comparison between the two. And as much as I'm going to weight his first season with how poorly the defence was in front of him, it's then also you have to bear in mind that now he's in the team, at least last season with Burnley in the Championship, that was organised in front of him. And even though he had the team that was organised in front of him, he was still able to drastically overperform in his shot stopping metrics. So you look at the post-shot expected goal plus 90, 0.26. Now Ederson has never reached that number. His highest was 0.19, and that was last season, but then off the back of having to face so many high quality chances. So when Ederson has very little to do, you're seeing the numbers 0.01, 0.08, 0.04 compared to James Trafford, very organised defence in front of him, and then still manages to overperform on top, which speaks to his ability as a shot stopping keeper. Now this is another one I found, which was on his Burnley last season kind of metrics. So goalkeeper on the ball value, shot stopping, position error, goalkeeper aggressive distance, claims, pass into danger, long balls. So the claim aspect, obviously I've mentioned that throughout this video. That's something to watch. Like he's more than fine when it comes to claiming the ball. At least he did for Burnley in the Championship last season. But then when he comes to Manchester City, that's something you want to watch and see how well he does do. Not that Ortega is somebody that's that impressive in that aspect either, but it is something that Ederson could do that we've seen him be hesitant with and not be as decisive. But for the most part across his career, he was able to do that. And then you got goalkeeper on the ball value very high, very low. Sorry, no, sorry, wrong way round. Very high, shot stopping very high as we'd expect. So they're all good stuff to see. When it comes to the kind of distribution aspect, I'll get onto this a little bit later, but it's important to bear in mind that with Burnley, he just wasn't asked to be this keeper that's always sweeping out, this keeper that was always looking to progress the ball and push the ball a lot forward himself, rather than he'd be looking to move it onto the defenders of the fullbacks in front of him. And then when it comes to playing long, there's a very, very big difference between how Manchester City would want to play long, the volume they would play long compared to Burnley, so it would be much less. And then it would be more targeted, more specific with the plans that they are filing out to be able to play long into the likes of Erling Haaland, the likes of Omar Mamouche. I mean, you look at the Juventus game in the Club World Cup, and you can already see in that match the way they've moved Jeremy Doku inside, Savinho inside, Marmouche to then pull out wide and then open up that space. It's quite different to when he was playing at Burnley, and you're very much just hitting it as long as possible, and to really not great positions for your forwards to be able to win that, and then not the very best at creating a space for your forwards to be one-on-one. So that's just something to remember. We look at shot stopping. I believe this is missing 1 or 2 goals, but nonetheless, very impressive shot stopping metrics from James Trafford. When you're looking at all of these, whether it is crosses, set pieces, outside penalty area, obviously you'd expect 12 to be inside the penalty area. It's just the most likely position to be able to concede those goals, but only conceding 2 goals off crosses, I'd mentioned earlier, and then 4 goals off set pieces. I'd mentioned earlier that is something to be concerned about, but it's good to see that set pieces, crosses is not a very high number in comparison to what he would have been facing from his season before that in the Premier League. Move over to this one. This is the shot stopping across the final season, so 16 goals conceded. Expected to concede 28.5, 103 shots faced on target across the season, and then goals prevented 12.5. So, as I mentioned earlier, very organised defence in front of him, yet he's still able to overperform the XG and prevent 12.5 goals on average across that season. This is outside the penalty area action, receive, pass and sweeps. So receives quite a few passes in the central area where we would step out, but that's a very little volume in comparison to what you'd expect from him at Manchester City. So that's just wanted to point out that the number of times he's asked to sweep, the number of times that he's able to get out on the ball is not what he's going to be used to at City. City's going to be a lot more of that. They're going to use him a lot more in the build-up. So when you're looking at these metrics, and they're maybe not the most impressive, they really shouldn't be if he's not really asked to do that within a team that often, and the team's not set up to do that at all. This is passes from the back and hand passes. Just on the hand passes, from what I've watched, he does look very good at when he's picking up the ball and then he needs to make a quick run out and throw the ball over to a midfielder, to a forward that is making a run. He's very good at picking out these passes. Obviously only one unsuccessful. Good amount on the left and the right, and the centre obviously very evenly distributed. But from what I have seen, he's very good, has a very good eye to spot where those passes need to be played, when they need to be played quickly, and I think that's a good thing to kind of add as a number one keeper to Manchester City. Passes from play, so this is him playing out from the back. Quite a few of these for Burnley to be able to play a quick break. Obviously the one shot assist. The concern, obviously, I mentioned with the playing long, 40 metres plus, 53.3. I believe Ederson's long passes are more towards like 70 odd %. And Ortega would be not far behind on that, if not a little bit higher. So obviously that's something that you'd have to watch. So when it comes to playing short under pressure, a very confident keeper, more than capable of distributing from the back, playing it short in the build-up, definitely can do that. Playing it more like kind of medium passes, so we're talking about those kind of chip balls out to a wide centre-back that's pulled out there, or your full-back like Ederson that's out on the touchline, playing those kind of medium length passes chipped over to them over the press. Perfectly fine with playing them. Playing the kind of short passes into the pivots that dropped, more than fine playing them. But then when it comes to the very long passes, when we're talking about Omar Mamouche pulling off left to right into space, Erling Haaland 1v1 with a centre-back into space, that's the area where the numbers aren't particularly impressive from last season with Burnley. But then, as I mentioned throughout the video, who you're playing with, the team that's set up, is very different to what you'd be doing at Manchester City. So I'd just bear that in mind, that we could see those numbers improve quite drastically just because he's coming into a more settled team with a clear plan, and then with better players to be able to take advantage of those one-on-one situations. And then obviously coming from Manchester City, growing up as a midfielder that became a goalkeeper, coming through the City Academy, the way that the likes of Ashley Cole and other players that have been involved in the England training camps have spoken about him across the board. This is a guy that is clearly very good with his feet, is clearly well-rounded as a goalkeeper, and is spoken about very highly. We move on to this one with goal kick. So, as I mentioned, they launch a lot of their goal kicks with Burnley compared to Ederson. I think they launch like 50, 60, 70 sort of percent range for Burnley, whereas when you're looking at Ederson and Ortega, it's more like 20, 26%, that kind of range. So you're obviously going to be quite different if you're changing that aspect of your game to play a lot more shorter in the goal kicks. And then obviously if you're playing long into these situations, you're just not going to be able to make as many successful passes. But then even with that, he's done quite well with Burnley. So you look at this, unsuccessful passes highlighted there. Destination for own goal for goal kick. So own third only misses one. Central third 81.8%, and then final third 87.5%. So that's still a very good rate for somebody playing, hitting the goal kicks long, able to hit the target and find a player. And we've seen City kind of toy around with different ideas in this way in the Club World Cup. We've seen City last season in particular look to try and set up goal kicks and pull out wide Erling Haaland and win balls over on this spot over here. So when it comes to the goal kick aspect, I think this gives you a better idea of, when it comes to playing long, that James Trafford will definitely be able to be a benefit to Manchester City. And when it comes to the kind of like distribution from open play and playing long, there's probably a little bit that's missed in that aspect due to the way that Burnley play and the quality of players that they do have. And then this just brings me to kind of towards the end of the video, looking at the squad, looking at some of the talent we do have. So this would be if we bought James Trafford, he comes in as the number one, Ortega stays as your number two, obviously Bettinelli already in as your number three. I've a left right back open because City could go and buy somebody. Obviously Livramento is seen as the number one target. Then who becomes the backup right back is a little bit up in the air. We've seen reports that Vitor Hayes Guardiola wants to keep. I'd expect Diaz, Kusanov and Gvardiol to stay. I'd expect Ayanori O'Reilly to stay. Rodri, Nico, Foden, Cherki, Dejani Reinders, Bernardo Silva, Lewis, Doku, Bob, Savino, etc. See all the players there. Now, this brings us to 5 homegrown players because we've got the 2 keepers, Rico, Foden and Bob. O'Reilly goes on the 21 list. This is based on the Champions League because I expect the squads to be the same between the Premier League and the Champions League. The Champions League is more strict, so I've chosen that one. So you would have O'Reilly on this, and then the following season he'd move off an under 21 and become homegrown. But as it stands now, you've got 5 homegrown players. You've got 15 out of 17 non-homegrown spots filled. That gives you a squad size of 20. And really, you're looking at your right back slots, and you're looking at your left back, backup left centre back spot as players to keep. These are players I've left out as future to be determined. So Matheus Nunes, I feel like could go, could stay, but he would take up a non-homegrown spot. Echeverri, I think they'll send out on loan. Gundogan and Kanji Kovacic, I think, are all candidates to sell, especially when you're looking at the other players in their position. If you are keeping Vitor Hayes, if you are keeping Kusanov, then I don't see much value in keeping a Kanji unless you want him to be exclusively your backup right back. If that was the case, you're probably looking at moving on Matheus Nunes. So let's say they bring in somebody like Livramento, he'd be homegrown. You'd keep Akanji for one more season as your kind of backup right back that's much more of a kind of defensive shutdown guy that's not looking to progress so much. As a good counter to Livramento, well, that means that Matheus Nunes is a little bit redundant and you can move him on. But it's very tough to see many of these players staying next season, whether it is a sale or a loan, given that you only have 2 spots left for a non-homegrown player. James McAtee, expect to go, 1 year left, wants to go play, won't sign a new contract, so he'll have to go. Calvin Phillips, Jack Grealish, you expect them to find a way to shift them no matter what, whether it's a loan or whatever. And then you've got John Stones and Nathan Ake, both homegrown, so you've got the space on the homegrown list. Nathan Ake in particular I think would be a good fit as that backup left back, provided that you're not needing him to play as a left back, just as a backup left centre back, and then you're not asking him to play left back. You're not giving him the demands of having to press high up the pitch for a player that's dealt with a few injuries of late. And then that's looking in a good spot. If you're asking me, I'm probably looking at keeping Nathan Ake, moving on the rest of the homegrown players, loan at Echeverri, and then I would keep Matheus Nunes as the backup right back, and I would buy Tino Livramento if possible, and then that would be, to me, a very healthy team, a lot of competition across it, much younger as you can see by the key that I've laid out here, much more long term. And then if we move over to, this is the under 23 players, the under 23 options that we would have. Now you think about this in comparison to what we were looking at the end of the treble season. It's changed significantly. You've got a young homegrown keeper, Rico Lewis homegrown, Oscar Bob homegrown out wide, Savinho, Echeverri, Shirky, Saveda Nipon, Jemry Doku, Nico O'Reilly, Gvardiol, Bar, Nico, Hayes, Kusanov. Like, that's a lot of good, talented under 23 players that have refreshed the team and done so very quickly. I think about Viana coming in January into the summer, the way they moved, particularly in that January transfer window, to then bring in these players, that by the time we're looking at the end of this summer, there's a good amount of very talented young players already in the team that's then starting to kind of build up what the next iteration of Manchester City will be. And you're also looking to fill in. So if you're thinking about some of the midfielders that you've got Shirky there, but then you've got Echeverri, the next guy in behind, even younger. You think of some of the midfielders that you do have. You've got Tijani Reinders, but then now you've got younger players in Rico Lewis and Sveda Nipan in behind as well. So you've not just got the guys in their prime and then the young guys coming up that want to be rotation, but then you've also got the talented players below that are looking to work their way into the actual squad itself. So yeah, I think squad would be in a very healthy place. I really do like the idea of James Trafford moving. I mentioned in the very first video that the ideal for me would have been that Ederson stays at number 1, Ortega goes, Trafford comes in, has a season to get himself familiar, and then overtakes as your number 1 keeper. But if they're buying him this summer, Ederson's obviously going, it's to be a number 1. I'd mentioned the kind of concerns about him playing long and seeing how that plays out, which I'm less concerned about. I mentioned concern about him dominating his box in set pieces, corners, etc. That's something to be concerned about, and to see how that plays out next season in the Premier League if he makes that move. But apart from that, I think you obviously just have to rip the band-aid off, get him in there, get him playing minutes. And the good thing about keeping Ortega is that you do have a safe pair of hands that can do the job as a backup, so I don't see the point in kind of moving him on. But at least in Stefan Ortega, you've got somebody that can step in for a game or two and do a job. I know last season wasn't his best, and I know people are concerned about him being the number 1. But if we're talking about needing to give James Trafford a bit of a break, take him out the limelight as you're kind of easing him in, Ortega is a great goalkeeper to be able to do that, whilst not really being your kind of number 1. So you've got that kind of good balance there. Somebody that's experienced and knows how the team needs to play and set up. Obviously lacks in some aspects, but knowing you've got that ability to give a bit more relief to James Trafford depending on how some of the performances go, and to make sure you can kind of rotate him in the cup games as well. I think would be very, very useful and would help to kind of ease that transition in. But it's definitely fair to be concerned that he's coming in quite young. As I mentioned at the start of the video, so did Ederson, and then quickly within a year everybody changed their minds, and he wasn't too young, he was good enough. So things can change very quickly in football. So yeah, that's all my thoughts on James Trafford. Just to kind of give you a quick rundown of where I'm at on the move, on the back of the news, some of his qualities, some of the concerns that I do have, and yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have your own thoughts on what you think he does really well, some of the concerns that you have, keepers you would prefer to have instead, whether you think I'm wrong about keeping Ortega around, and whether it would be too much to have those two as your kind of number one, number two keepers, then please let me know down below in the comments. Otherwise, please make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one, and we'll be back with plenty more content this week.